Welcome back, YouTube. So today I want to go over how to lay out a Celtic Interlace shelf support. Now I'm going to break this up into two videos, laying out the supports and then actually building the shelf, because I want to take the time to actually explain why I'm doing certain steps and why I got this particular board, even though it's going to be much shorter and end up much thinner than what this is. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button and join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday for Manliness Mondays, Wednesday for philosophy questions in the morning, and Fridays for project videos like this. All right, first is the selection of the type of lumber. Now this has it marked on the back, but the back's not as interesting as the front. So I'm just gonna tell you what it says. KDHT, which means kiln dried, heat tempered. Now, there's a few things that are good about getting kiln-dried wood. It's already gotten all the water out of it, and it's dried, so it's a stable piece of wood. Well, at least as stable as solid lumber can get. And I chose the 12-inch wide as opposed to the 10-inch wide, even though it's only got to be 10 inches wide, because the larger the piece of lumber, you're going to get cracks at the edges, just by the nature of how it dries. So all these big cracks are going to be taken off when I finally cut the interlace out. Also, so that gives me a larger area of finished wood. Also, for the price, digging through the lumber rack to find one piece that doesn't have any cracks, you're just so much better off getting just a larger piece of lumber and cutting it back. Otherwise, you'd have to fill in all these cracks or try and put glue in there and squeeze the ever-living daylight out of it. And that won't work on something this thick. It's a 2-inch piece of lumber. Now this crack here will be a problem, but I'll show you how to deal with that during the assembly process. And all these little holes here, it looks ugly when it's all this big wide sheet of lumber here. However, once it's cut up, you're either not going to notice it or it's going to be so minuscule that it's going to look like a beauty mark, as opposed to these long tracks of lines, which I think are put on there by the machine feeding it down the conveyor, because they're pretty evenly spaced. So let me show you how to lay it out. The biggest thing to consider about the layout is the overall length. And the first thing you should concern yourself with is getting things marked out. I'm going to have this shelf 7 foot tall. It's going to be a fairly tall shelf. At the bottom though, I'm going to have it start out 6 inches off the ground, and then 10 inches up after that is where the center of each shelf is going to be. Now the reason to start 6 inches off the ground is to give me some adjustment area, and I can also stuff some small things underneath it. I wanted to make it 7 foot tall so that I can still use that top shelf and still have a hefty ring around the top. Makes things nice and easy. Also, round numbers are a fantastic thing. Now the next step is to take out your square and mark out 5 inches and 10 inches respectively. And you want to mark it off the good side. So all these checks here, that's going to get cut off. Don't let that get in the way of marking it. Once you get the first line drawn, it's as simple as rinse and repeat. Now this outside line isn't super critical. You see it hit several of the checked areas. Don't get too concerned about it. What matters is that it is mostly just a visual guideline to make sure that your compass isn't overshooting. Now what you're doing now is using your square to make sure you hit all your center lines. And this will be the apex right here of where each circle of the interlaces started. Or this is the center mark for each piece of interlace. Now when you set this up, you could easily set the outside mark where you want it. But I always like playing it safe, going by using a ruler and then double checking. Now all you have to do is repeat this up and down. And then we're going to switch radiuses and draw the inside. And that's where things get a little funky. Now, since I want these rings to be 3 inches thick, I'm gonna have to take 3 inches off of this. So that's a 5-inch radius. I'll have to drop down to a 2-inch radius. And don't worry too much about being super precise here. The big thing you want to worry about doing is getting your center point consistent for each circle. Even if they're not consistent from circle to circle, as long as they're consistent within each circle. That's the big thing that matters here. Here's the odd part. You need to separate the tangents from each of these guys, or split the difference of the tangents. And what I mean, the inside curve goes to the outside curve. And that happens all the way down and all the way up. Then the outside curve goes to the inside curve. And this is how you get the illusion of that interlace. What interlace is it's a Celtic idea meaning infinity, basically. It's as if you take a single piece of rope that's connected in a perfect circle, intertwine it without stop. There's never any breaks. And to get that illusion, you have to do these over-unders, but then you have to do it top to bottom. This is the top, that means this will be the bottom. And there's going to be a special way to do that. That'll have to be in the next video. You also need to be careful to keep your line thickness consistent with all the donuts that you just drew. It's tedious, but if you can do it, it really pays off in the end. Now remember, the angles don't need to stay perfect between them. You're just talking about consistency of the thickness. That's it. Just keep in mind, all you're doing is making the illusion of the interlace. One day I have a shop where I can do this on the table. One day. Now you could do this the easy way by figuring out where all these intersection points are, laying that out with your square, and then running down and hitting every intersection point. I prefer to do it this way, not because I think the other way is cheating, but the slight variances give it a more organic feel. While robotic certainty is nice on it, can be nice in a project, this isn't one that you want to be perfect. This is one where you specifically want it to be organic. So even though it's laid out very carefully, all these have slightly different angles, and that makes it look more real. If it's too perfect, it looks like it was cut by a machine, and that's not the picture that you should go after with this. Also, if you notice how I'm laying it out, I already had the over-unders figured out where I want it to be. So when I'm drawing this line, stop terminating between these two lines. And that'll just help me further down the road to visually distinguish where to, carve in the under portion. And trust me, you want to draw the top and bottom because you do see the tops and bottoms. Even if it is only a small little amount like that, it does make a difference on the overall project. And if you've been noticing, these all pretty much hit the center line. That's because I did it so close. Actually, they should always cross over at the center line, regardless of what angle they're on. But if you want a less dense look, lay these out further apart. So let's say for a 10-inch wide shelf, instead of having the centers 10 inches apart, have them 12 inches apart or 16 inches apart. It'll make everything look very spread out and give you a much more relaxed look. However, you don't want to go denser than a 1-to-1 ratio. It'll just make it look terrible. So now that this whole thing is laid out, it's time to pay some special attention to the bottom. Now, if you downloaded my plans and read the instructions for the other set of shelves I built, you'll realize that the trick I told you about how to make the shelves level will not work here. What that basically means is you put a level on the back shelf, or on the back support, get that plumb, and then wherever the front support intersects and keeps that level is where you drill and put in the support. With this shelf, it is the front and back, so you can't move it. So the easiest thing to do is to take this bottom here and put a slant across it. Since we're registering everything off this side has all the chip out on it, not the chip out, but all the checking. I want to make sure you have exactly where this ends. And then you want to put a 1 degree slope in it. I want this to be the front so you don't see as much of the checking. So the slope's going to have to go high in the front, low in the back. And that'll make it lean back towards the wall, because these floors are not level. For that you need a bevel gauge. I'll zero it against my fence here. Then from here, I want to put a 2 degree slope. May not seem like a lot, but that 2 degrees will keep it from tipping forward. This will ensure things don't fall off, because this is a tall shelf, but also a very narrow one, so you do need a natural back slope. Now, when you're creating something that hugs the wall, there's a section of baseboard that you need a company for. Now, usually it's about 4 inches, but I'm gonna go 6. That's 6.5 just to be safe. I'll just leave it at 5. That'll give me a good terminus there. So what I'm gonna do is come in a 1/2 inch. That's coming in 1 inch. And you never want to really end with a hard right angle if you can. So this is kind of where you start getting sketchy and, well, sketchy. This is where I just decide to start sketching things out, having a little bit of fun with it. So I want a border there, and I'll do a border down here. There's 2 purposes for these borders here. One, it gives me a terminal for the ground and for the interlace. The second is I'm going to have the interlace dive underneath this terminus, so that'll give me a straight edge if I want to chop this down in the future and make it perfectly level. Let's say I know I have level floors. This will give me a straight edge to measure off of in the future. And this is where you get to have a little bit of fun. So now this is all going to be slightly recessed, not recessed, but drop down a little bit thinner in the thickness of this board. So you get to play with the depth here as well as the in and out. Let's roll with that. We'll make a center bead here. What I'm going to try and do is round this over. We're going to keep this flat. This will get rounded. And don't worry too much about the specifics with this. In the end, what you're going to end up doing is cutting this with a jigsaw anyways. So little imperfections in these curves don't matter all that much. Besides, this is the bottom, this is the base, this is where things matter. This isn't really got to be seen that much. So have a little bit of fun with it. Don't get too wrapped up. I think what I'll do with this is also cup it down as much as I can practically to make it give the appearance of an ovular structure. Yeah, that looks good to me. Now, all I'm going to have to do is transfer all of this onto the next piece, and away we go. So YouTube, what'd you think? I know this isn't the most exciting of videos, just showing you how to lay out a piece and explaining the reasons behind some of it. And I know it's a little bit hard to see the pencil lines with the flash on the camera. However, if you can, notice that only a very small amount of any of the checking, right down here, little piece right here, actually got into any of these rings. So that's the advantage of getting that wider piece. If I got a 10-inch piece, so I wouldn't have to worry about all this extra here, I would have massive checking through each of these rings. And I did get rid of most of the bad spots at the top. Now, I do still have to contend with this, but this one piece here, even if I break that completely off and re-glue it back on, is a lot better having to do that in one spot than in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different spots. So that's the advantage of getting the wider board. So join me next week and see how this looks when it's actually cut out. Trust me, it'll look a lot nicer once everything's cut out on it. If you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button and join me every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday for Manliest Monday, Wednesday mornings for a little bit of philosophy, and Fridays for another project video. Take care, and as always guys, thank you for helping me make a better world, one kerf at a time. See you next week.